Hi, this is an attempt to put down some thoughts about Oedipus. Um, and it's kind of more for us as teachers rather than students because it's not really well formulated in my head yet. These are my thoughts that might kind of help us start our discussions about Oedipus. So let's go. First of all, is it Oedipus Rex? Is it Oedipus Tyrannus or Oedipus the King? I think it probably doesn't matter. But Rex comes from the Latin, and it's not really a Roman play, so it's probably less accurate to call it Oedipus Rex. Oedipus Tyrannus is probably the most accurate. That's probably what Sophocles called it. But the word tyrant has other connotations in modern day English, so it more meant in ancient Greek, it more meant illegitimate ruler rather than it wasn't. So Oedipus wasn't necessarily a tyrant in that kind of way. So I kind of think Oedipus the king is probably the best way forward. But whatever we call it will be fine. So today we're going to talk about Sophocles himself, Oedipus the myth, Oedipus the king by Sophocles, the actual play, and then themes and symbols. Often when I teach texts, I do a little bit of context to just kind of get ourselves going, but I think that for this one, I'm going to be spending a lot of time setting up context because the context of the play is really important. This is a play that's 2,500 years old, almost 2,500 years old. So setting up the context of it will be really important to them understanding, the play and understanding what the Athenians would have understood when they walked in. So let's start with Sophocles himself. So if we're talking about Sophocles, he was born in either 497 or 496 BCE in ancient Greece, and he lived till about the age of 90. So what was the world like then in Greece? Well, there are all these city-states, these cities being ruled by individual kings and queens, such as Thebes, Athens, Sparta. There was also a large political organization, which was the Oracle at Delphi. So the Oracle at Delphi, what they were really was a conduit from Apollo. So Apollo set what would happen in the world, and Delphi would be in some kind of communication with Apollo, and then in exchange for cash, be able to relate that to whoever comes asking. So people would go along to the Oracle of Delphi and say, hey, should we invade this place or not? And the Oracle would give them a prophecy and they would say, okay, yes, I should, or no, I shouldn't. Or it might be like, hey, why is this thing happening to me? Here's some cash. And the Oracle would give them a prophecy and then on they would go and be very, very happy. So the Oracle had been around for hundreds of years before the time of Sophocles. Sophocles was, in the 5th century BC, but the Oracle had been around since the 8th century and would be around for hundreds of years afterwards, right? It wasn't until about 390 CE that the Oracle, that the shrine at Delphi was destroyed. So, and my understanding is that they were still giving prophecies even that late. So it had been around for a long time and will continue to be around for a very long time. So it was in the day-to-day reality of Sophocles, but he also included it as the day-to-day reality of Oedipus. So yes, which is obviously from a myth much longer before Sophocles was around. So why am I talking so much about Delphi? Well, Delphi was really important to Sophocles personally. Delphi gave a prophecy to Sparta that started this Peloponnesian War between Sparta and Athens, which was, if you have a look at the dates there, the vast majority of Sophocles' life, or adult life at least, was spent in this war. He ended up becoming a general because he had a good way with words and it was seen to be a good thing. Like the Oracle had direct impact upon the vast majority of his life. And it comes up when we're going to talk about the play, obviously. The second thing that I think is really important to know about Sophocles' life is that in Athens there was a plague, there were two plagues, and it really crushed the Athenian spirit. There was a lot of feeling about what can we even do about this? It's all a bit hopeless. We're all a bit kind of subject to the plagues of the gods kind of feeling. So you can imagine if you know the play, these kind of events probably had a huge effect upon Sophocles' thoughts about Delphi and about determinism and these kind of things. So, where was the play first presented? It was first presented in 429 BCE in Athens in this theatre of Dionysus. At the time, there was, a large competition. A number of plays would have been presented, a series of 3 plays, 2 very serious plays, and a silly little third one. Oedipus, the king, actually won second prize. So there is another play out there that won first prize, actually beat this play. Well, this play is considered to be one of the best plays, tragic plays, ever to have been written. Unfortunately, the one that won first prize has since been lost to history, so we don't know what that was. It might have been even better. We don't know, but yeah, so I just think it's funny that they won second prize. The second thing is that I want you to know that the important thing is that the Athenians walking into this theatre would have been aware of the Oedipus myth. The Oedipus myth had been around for a very, very long time. It's mentioned in, Homer, in not the Iliad, but the Odyssey, right? So the Odyssey describes the Oedipus and kind of goes into details about that. So they would have been well aware of this myth, okay? So what's the myth they'll be aware of? So this is a diagram, a story diagram. We'll try to work our way through it. But this is the story that the Athenians would have been aware of when they read the title Oedipus Tyrannus. They would have kind of go, okay, well, I know what this is about. Much like if you go to a movie and it's called Spider-Man, probably going to know a lot of what's going to happen in this film, right? They're going to know a lot of what's going on. So when I teach this, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to explicitly teach the story of Oedipus, right? And then then we'll read the play, because the way the Athenian knowledge of the play and the way it's actually constructed for their entertainment in regards to the play Oedipus the King is quite creative and quite interesting. So I think it's important that we walk into this play with the same kind of knowledge that the average Athenian citizen would have. Anyway, so there was King Laius and Jocasta, the Queen Jocasta. They get a prophecy from this Temple of Apollo, from the Temple of Delphi, and that basically says, hey, your son is going to kill you, the king, and going to marry you, the queen. That's terrible. And they went, that's disgusting. Oh, we don't want that. So what they did is they took their son, Oedipus, and they put a nail through his ankles, right? And then gave him to a herdsman, and the herdsman took him out into the mountains, and he was told to leave him there. Instead, the herdsman ended up taking the nail out of his ankles and gave him to a messenger who took pity on him and took him back to the city of Corinth, where Polybus and Merope raised him as their own. So many years later, Oedipus is now an adult, and he starts hearing rumors about how Polybus and Merope might not be his actual mother and father, blah, 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 blah. He goes to this Temple of Delphi to kind of say, hey, what's this all about? And then he hears a prophecy. And the prophecy is, hey, Oedipus, you are destined to kill your father and marry your mother. And he goes, no, that's disgusting. I don't want anything to do with that. So he runs away from the people he thinks is his mother and father, not realizing, of course, that they're actually not, they're actually his adopted mother and father. So he runs away from them. Meanwhile, at the same time, Laius has left the city of Thebes and has gone on a journey to the Temple of Apollo to ask about some more prophecies that he's been suffering from. So he's left Thebes, and weirdly enough, Oedipus and Laius meet at a crossroads, at a place where four roads meet, or three roads meet. And they basically suffer from road rage. You know, Laius is like, hey, get off the road. And Oedipus is like, no, you get off the road. Things escalate. And Oedipus kills every single person in the field. He kills all the guards. He kills the driver of the train. And he kills kills Laius himself. Actually, there is a messenger who survives. He comes back later. But yes, there's, I think there's one survivor, maybe. Maybe he doesn't kill everybody. Anyway, he kills, one person survives. Anyway, so Oedipus kills all these people. He just thinks it's a random traveler, not realizing it's, of course, his own father. So even at this point, Oedipus has unknowingly fulfilled the first half of the prophecy. He continues down to Thebes, and there is a sphinx there. I think we can recognize the image of the sphinx from Egypt, which is, of course, ruled by the Greeks for a very long time. But anyway, that's beside the point. So the idea of the sphinx, and the sphinx is like, hey, if you answer my riddle, I'll let you go. And the people of Thebes are like, hey, if you defeat the sphinx, we'll let you become king. And he's like, oh, this is a good deal. So he goes down to the sphinx, says, okay, what's your riddle? And it's a riddle that we are even familiar with today. And I think the riddle is something like, what moves on four legs in the morning, two legs in the afternoon, and three legs at night. And Oedipus figures out, well, that's man, because as a baby in the morning, we crawl on four legs. Through the afternoon, which is our adulthood, we walk on two legs. And then at evening, which is our being old, we have a cane and it's our three legs. The Sphinx goes, zounds, you defeated me with your masterful riddling. So the Sphinx disappears, and Oedipus becomes the king and marries the queen of Thebes, which is Jocasta, and just happens to be his mother. So now he has fulfilled both and all sides of the prophecy, right? And that's kind of the story that they'll be aware of. They'll also be aware of a lot more than that. Things happen afterwards. Oedipus goes into exile after discovering what happened, and blah 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 blah. And there's a lot about his children and the effects of the after effects of what happened. So there's a lot more of the story, but that's what's important for us to know walking in. So what was Sophocles' version of this? So they know what's going to happen, right? They know, Athenians walking in know the story. How did Sophocles present this in a very interesting way? Well, he did it in such an interesting way that Aristotle wrote about it, obviously many hundreds of years later. And Aristotle wrote about what the structure of a tragedy should be. And Sophocles wrote it in such a convincing way that we have used that structure even till today. You look at something like Law and Order, and everything's already happened. The investigators, Law and Order episode is not, someone's about to be killed and we've got to find out what's going to happen and maybe stop it. No, in Law and Order episode, the murder's already happened. All the major events have already gone on, and it's about discovering the truth, right? That's what a Law and Order episode is about, and that's what about Oedipus the King is about. Sophocles concentrated on just, a very short amount of time after everything's already happened, and it's about Oedipus finding out. And that's what Sophocles was really interested in. So by the time we start here, right, a plague has occurred. He's already been king for many, 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 many years, right? And he asks a prophet about, like, how do we solve this plague, right? Which is of great interest to Athenian audiences at the time, wasn't it? Right? That how do we stop plagues? Well, the oracle says we should find the murderer of the king of Laius. Oedipus says, "Ah, yes, that's right. We should find the murderer and damn him," not realizing it's actually himself who murdered Laius on the crossroads. This other prophet comes along and says, after a bit of an argument, Tiresias doesn't really want to tell us, but after a bit of an argument, he says, you were the murderer. Oedipus doesn't believe him, gets upset at Tiresias, and gets upset at his brother-in-law Creon. They fight over it. Jocasta says, don't worry about that. More, prophecies don't really mean anything. Then she tells a story about, the crossroads and how, there was this prophecy that they were taught about, how your child is going to murder the father and marry the mother, but that didn't come true because Laius was killed on the road. And Oedipus kind of goes, oh, wait, that sounds disturbingly similar to the prophecy I was told about murdering my father and marrying my mother. Let's look into that. And then he looks into it and eventually discovers what happens. Jocasta commits suicide and he gouges his own eyes out with a pin. Then it's about the suffering and whatever else, and he leaves the city, and then the plague is ended, right? So that structure, this unity of action, right? This one single storyline, this unity of location, it all happens in Thebes, and really all happens either in the castle or in the palace rooms, or just outside on the steps, right? And unity of time, it all happens within an hour or so, is the basis of so many plays that came after that. So what's this all about, right? And I think vast majority of what we're going to be talking about in this play is determinism. Should Delphi be trusted? This is not an abstract question about are we all determined. This is a practical question that has caused a major war that went on for most of Sophocles' life, right? Should Delphi be trusted? Can the prophets in Delphi really tell the future? And are those predictions absolutely 100% going to happen? And if that's true, do we have free will? Can we decide things, right? And if so, what kind of things can we decide? If we can't decide anything, how can we possibly be responsible for our actions, right? Could we really be held responsible for crimes if everything we do has been determined by some god? And can anything be done about natural disasters? These are some of the questions I want to ask. And it all kind of focuses around this determinism. It's particularly around three types of determinism. The first type of determinism is divine determinism. So in divine determinism, it is a god has, or in this case, Apollo, has determined everything that will happen. This will happen, and then this will happen, and this will happen, and then this will happen. And Delphi is saying, hey, is it true? This is what happens. And that's what happens, right? And from Sophocles' point of view, should Delphi be trusted? 100% yes, right? In this play, every character that attempts to escape prophecy only solidifies their fate. Whether we're talking about Jocasta and Laius, getting rid of Oedipus when they were young, or Oedipus running away from his adopted step parents, thinking that they were his real parents, or Jocasta, openly doubting the oracle and then suffering as a result. Everyone meets their fate, right? And you've got to realize, like, for Sophocles, this is quite a big thing, right? He like the oracle had told the Spartans to go to war with Athens, and as a result, like Sophocles went to war. Sophocles was a general at this time, so he received much death, and there would be a lot of questions around whether Delphi can be trusted. And the answer, according to Sophocles, I think, is 100% yes. But there are other types of determinism being discussed here. As I was saying, a good 2,000 years later, but over 2,000 years later, Freud is talking about the Oedipus complex, and he's talking about marrying your mother and your father being an obstacle to that. But he didn't get that from nowhere, right? This is in the text. Jocasta talks about, as for this marriage with your mother, have no fear. Many a man before you in his dreams has shared his mother's bed, right? So it's in the text, right? We do need to make sure we're a little bit careful with that. Certainly, I don't believe that Sophocles would have had much idea about, our modern ideas about biological determinism. But for that matter, he really didn't have much idea about the formalized notion of determinism at all, right? Determinism wasn't discussed for much later in our kind of from a philosophical history point of view, but he obviously had some idea about things being set, about things being determined, and that your biology might be a part of that, but certainly gods are part of that as well. So we can also talk about the biological aspect of determinism. The last one is the more kind of obvious one, or maybe not obvious, but it's like more concrete. There's determinism due to time. We can't change yesterday, right? And this is a massive factor in this text. And it's supported by the structure that Sophocles decided to take. He wanted to present a play where all the events have already happened. This isn't a play about avoiding fate. It can't be avoided. It happened yesterday, or it happened years ago in the case of Oedipus, right? It happened, when he was a young man, and now he's much older, right? It's already happened, right? This is a play about, can you find out about it? And that's what we're going to talk about next, right? But this determinism, due to the fact it's already happened, seems like a weird way to talk about determinism, but I think it's a really concrete way of talking about determinism in the context of this text. So, are we responsible, right? Is Oedipus a tragic hero? Well, if we go to Aristotle, who wrote about this and used Oedipus the king as a model, it's supposed, right? Or at least it matches up perfectly. We know that Aristotle loved Oedipus. This is it's not a direct quote, but it's kind of what he thought about tragic heroes. So tragic heroes typically have heroic traits that earn them the sympathy of the audience, but also have flaws or make mistakes that ultimately lead to their downfall. So if Oedipus was magically mind controlled, right, and forced to do it, I don't think he'd be a tragic hero, right? Because it's not his flaws that's resulting in his downfall. Every single year we're asking, is pride Macbeth's only flaw, or what is Macbeth's flaw, or is Macbeth responsible for his fate, right? What we're really asking for here when we ask these questions is Macbeth, or in this case Oedipus, a tragic hero, right? What are the qualities of Oedipus that resulted in his downfall? Well, Oedipus has these strong Athenian values. He's strong, intelligent, and he's decisive, right? All the way through the first kind of third of the text, it's like, hey, oh no, there's this plague, it's all terrible. Hey, Oedipus, you should, talk to the oracle. And Oedipus is like, that's exactly right. And not only that, I've already organized it. And hey, look, there's the guy coming back from the oracle now. Oedipus, we really should get a second opinion. That's exactly right. What a good idea. In fact, I've already organized it. There he is there. So Oedipus is always one step ahead of the action in the play, right? And what's more than that, he has a lot of the language of modern Athenian kind of values. He talks in a mathematical way, and he talks about empowerment of the populace, and he goes to them for their opinions, right? Which is a very Athenian value if you think about democracy and mathematics as being the two major developments of Athens at the time. But anyway, what's the point of all that? So we've got to be able to say that he does something. It's got to be his flaws that result in his downfall. But how can Oedipus result? How can Oedipus be at fault, right, or make mistakes if he lives in a determined world? Well, Oedipus does do two things, right? He does two things and only two things in this play. He is responsible for two things. First of all, he finds out the truth. Like every good Law and Order episode, he keeps pushing and pushing and pushing. People say to him, maybe we shouldn't, maybe we should let sleeping dogs lie. Maybe this is getting a bit too close to something a bit uncomfortable. Let's consider maybe not getting as involved in this, right? And Oedipus is like, listen to you, no more. I must know it all, must see the truth at last. He pushes and he pushes and he pushes to find out the truth, and then he suffers as a result, right? When he eventually finds out, he's taken a pin and he's jabbed his own eyes out, right? People says, why? Like, why? Well, like, who did this to you? Like, what happened? And he's like, Apollo, friends, Apollo, he ordained my agonies, these my pains upon pains. So he ordained the fact that I would kill my father and marry my mother. But the hand that struck my eyes was my own, mine alone, no one else. I did it myself, and that's relating to this find the truth, right? So this, the question now is, what's the value of the oracle at Delphi? If the truth is determined, if the events are determined, why even bother finding out? If they all happened years ago, why uncover this horrible past, right? Or if you're going to win or lose the battle, or you're going to go to a war anyway, why would the Spartans even go to the oracle to find out? It's all going to happen anyway, right? Why pay this money to get the prophecy? Well, finding the truth is what it's all about. In a determined world, your imperative is to understand that world and to understand what will be determined, right? And that's the same as whether you're talking about determined in the future with something like a prophecy, or determined about the past. We have an imperative to find out, right? And we might suffer the consequences of that, right? Yeah. Okay. Because the idea would be, surely Sophocles would say, in the context of his play, that Oedipus could have lived out the rest of his life happy if he'd never found out, right? And this kind of has led to his downfall as a result of this, right? Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, it's up to you to decide. Okay, other symbols, right? And again, this is all related to the same kind of thing, right? There's so much to do here, but I don't want to do something. We've already been talking for half an hour. So, we can talk about eyes and blindness. A lot of the people who are blind, there's a blind prophet, but who actually sees the truth, right? Versus, Oedipus, he can obviously see, and at the end he blinds himself when he actually finds out. A crossroads. There's too many roads here, but I think there's a meeting of three paths. Like, do you go left or do you go right? It's about decision making, and about chance, right? And about having your ankles pinned together, right? Oedipus, the word Oedipus comes from this idea of having, or the word is about pinning your ankles. So how empowered are we to act, right, in a determined world? So anyway, this was just something for you and I. I think it kind of gets us going with some ideas about Oedipus that we can have a think about. But thank you so much for getting involved in this text. I'd love to see where we're going to go with it and what is going to be on the exam in 2024. But yeah, all right. Thank you very much for listening.